Hi. So yes, I'm Helen. Can you hear me okay? Yes? So as Hannah has said, yes, I'm a UX consultant, user researcher. I'm also the diversity and inclusion champion for the office that I work with within BJSS and Spark. I organise Women in Tech and Technotium. So inclusivity is a thing that's massively important to me from both a professional design and research aspect and also the community that I work and live in as well. I'm also a massive fan of hot yoga, and when I got the email about doing a longer talk, I was actually on a yoga retreat in Portugal. So thankfully I had my laptop with me and we scooched it round. But it's really nice to actually have this longer slot because I love talking about this subject and I was really trying to condense it into 5 minutes. So I saw a tweet a while ago which said, we know our users and customers. And you don't really get the full effect from the still, so I've pulled the video out. And then watch for this kid on the right, because he's the best. So I love this so much because it's such a good metaphor for people not using things in the way that we've designed and built for them. It doesn't matter what we do necessarily. Once we put things out and we make them live and give them into the hands of people, they don't always respect all of the thought and processing that went into the way that we wanted them to do things. So I've spent time before I joined this company working in various other companies, and I became the lone UX designer. I think a lot of designers I know have been there. And as such, I was working in projects and companies that I didn't really have access to the users. So the way that I was working, I had no idea what they were doing with the designs that I was putting out. And I ended up becoming the representative user. And so I did what I could with the tools available. So I would plot user journeys, I would do screen design flows, and I would act as the representative user. And I would tell my clients, you know, you're not your user, and I'm going to advocate on their behalf. But this led to a problem, and it wasn't sitting right with me. And I read a book, which is an amazing book called Hippo. And in it, there's this quote: we spend a very long time mapping the user journey and plotting the customer journey, when in reality, every human is on a journey we know nothing about. Now, when I read this, I went, that makes sense. And that's why I've been feeling so conflicted in the work that I've been doing. Now, thankfully, that changed, and I changed jobs, and I moved more from design to user research. And I've been doing that for nearly 2 years now, and it's completely changed my outlook on things. And the main thing that I've really discovered, and I want to share with you, is that within technology and the environment that we work in, it's so easy to get trapped in filter bubbles. Now, the problem and the danger with filter bubbles is that you think you're getting a representative view of the world, and you are really not, and you don't know it. And I think this happens all of the time in technology. We are building things based on our biases, our assumptions, untested business models, and sometimes I think just plain wishful thinking. But when we do that, are we putting the cart before the horse? So this photo I took in my office a while ago, and I was like, I really want to know what this meeting was about, that this happened. And it turns out it was one of my user research colleagues saying, we're not doing things in the way that we need to do. And I think this happens a lot in Agile as well. It moves so quickly that sometimes it feels like we just need to ship something. We just need to land something into the next sprint. But when we do this, we're in danger of not only designing, building, shipping something that might not work either as we intend it, like the slide, but it might actually exclude people who we need to actually reach with what we're doing if we don't have a full understanding of who we're designing for. So this is a quote from the Microsoft Inclusive Design Manual, and I'm going to reference this again later because it's a really, 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 really good resource. If you're new to inclusive design, it's a really accessible way to start understanding what it is. And in it, they say, every decision we make can raise or lower barriers to participation in society. It is our collective responsibility to lower these barriers through inclusive products, services, environments, and experiences. But if we're not having access to the people that who are using our products or services, and we're advocating the user, we're assuming that we know what they need, how they behave, how can we lower these barriers? Because we don't really know what they are. So this talk, I want to challenge some assumptions that I think we all have, me included, completely. And I'll tell you a story about that soon. But within our industry, we work a lot on assumptions. So I want to challenge some of these. So the first one, our digital skills are the same, especially of the people that we're actually designing and building things for. So I want you to meet Keith. So this is not really Keith, this is a stock photo, and his name isn't actually Keith because we keep our participants anonymous. But he is real, I promise you. And I met him, he, as hopefully you can tell, is a mechanic. So that's a lot of the audience that I've been working with. And I went to see him to show him some new bits of the service we're working on and understand better how he used our service day to day. Now, the thing that really struck me about Keith was how unconfident he was. So he told me this. He said, I'm not very good with computers. Whatever system you've got has got to be completely idiot-proof because I'm an idiot with this sort of thing. I'm probably the worst person on the whole system. I think it was very interesting when Jennifer was saying about how we call our users idiots. They call themselves idiots a lot of the time. And a lot of the people I've met are very quick to judge their own skills. So Keith is not the worst person on the whole system. In fact, he's very, very capable of doing what he needs to do with it. And by this quote, you might think that he's not particularly tech savvy. He must only just log in and do that one thing that he needs to do. But he is a smartphone user. He has an iPhone. He does online banking. And he has actually quite a good range of digital skills. What was really interesting about his behavior, though, was his devices. So he told me he would use his iPhone for emails and texts, but anything more complicated, such as internet banking, he would do it on his laptop. Now, the reason wasn't to do with screen size or layout or anything to do with the interactivity of those. It was because of the location of the devices. So his laptop was at home. And also at home was his girlfriend and his daughter who could help him if things went wrong. So you can see that his level of confidence is really, really quite low. So you might have seen this. I know there's at least one GDS person in here, so you know it. So this is something called the Digital Inclusion Scale. And it ranks from never have, never will use the internet, all the way up to experts. So looking at Keith, we would look at planting him about here. He does have basic digital skills. But if we think about us in the audience today, we're here. We're experts because we're making the things that everyone else is using. And already when we start to plot that, we can see that there is this divide between the very person that is using the service I'm working on and us. And the problem of being that representative user is that we can't get rid of the knowledge that we have. And it's very, very, very difficult for us to think in a way that people who don't have the same skill sets as us do. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about the lower end of the scale because I find it really, really interesting. So when we're looking at the number ones, the never have, never wills, we get into the world of digital exclusion. I've skipped ahead though. Technically, this is not really a representative view of what that looks like. It would look more like that because it would be bad user research to only speak to one person. So what you do is you gather lots and lots of things together. But yeah, let's look at that lower end of the scale. So in the UK, there are 4.3 million people who are aged 15 and over who have 0 basic digital skills. 1/5 of the population do not have foundational digital skills. So foundational skills are things that are completely intuitive to you and me because we're up on the expert side of things. So let's look at what these skills are. So being able to use a device or a mouse or a keyboard or a touch screen. Being able to just search and use the internet. Being able to turn a device on and log into accounts and profiles. Being able to update and change a password when prompted to do so. Being able to connect to Wi-Fi, although we've all been there, I think. Being able to find and open different applications, programs on a device. And being able to use different menu settings to make it easy to use. So that's things like making your font size bigger, changing the speed of your mouse, those kind of additional settings. So to put this into some numbers, there are 4.9 million people in the UK who cannot use a mouse or a touch screen. I've had 2 user researchers tell me stories about this recently. The first was quite a young person who had gone to do some user research with them, and they had never used a PC and a mouse because they were touchscreen native. And they apparently held the mouse up to the monitor to move it round because they had no idea that the mouse had to stay down there. They were like, but we touch the screens. There's also 6 million people who can't turn on a device. And again, one of my user research colleagues went to do some work with people who'd been given iPads, and the guy was furiously just hitting the screen really hard because he didn't know how to turn it on. And 7.1 million people who can't open an app. So these are not small numbers. But in terms of these digital skills, I want to tell you about some research that I went to some usability testing quite recently. And the bane of my existence now is these. So QR codes. I mean, not that everyone really likes QR codes. But we did some research. We had 8 participants. And as part of a new bit of the service that we were doing, we required them to scan a QR code for security. Now, several of the people that we were speaking to had never done this before. And the range of trying this out was very interesting. As someone just scanned the QR code. There you go. A little treat for you there. So, yeah, it was really interesting because they just didn't know what to do. So, as a demonstration. So one of them held it and took a selfie because they thought they had to scan down in a kind of like ticket barrier way. One of them had a flip case and then just covered the camera and then was confused as to why that didn't work. And the most interesting one, and by far my favourite, was somebody who, whilst being told to scan, actually held their phone and went down the QR code because they had no idea. They had never, ever done it before. And then this is Sonia, not her real name, not her real face. And she said she'd never scanned anything before. She gets her daughter to do that. And if we were going to bring this into the service, she would need some idiot notes. The word idiot, again, came up. Now, if we put her on the digital inclusion scale, then she's further down. She's really very task specific. And anything that was out of her skill set that she wasn't used to, she had to be really shown how to do it. Now, we took this out to a few other people who were more on the public side of what we were doing. And my favourite quote, which I got recently from them, was that we have to remember that we are spacemen talking to cavemen. And that's how he described his group of people, that we were just, by introducing something which to us is as simple as a QR code, was so far beyond his skill set that this is the likeness that he painted of her himself. So all of these things, the QR codes, being able to search websites, being able to change your password, they all seem so intuitive to us. And that's because we sit within this term of digital privilege. And this is our bubble. And then for many different reasons, people sit outside of that bubble. Now, when they sit outside of that bubble, they are excluded in some way from what we're doing, what we're making, what we're giving them as products and services. So we need to think more inclusively, and we need to think more accessibly. So I want to go with another assumption, which is accessibility is for people with disabilities. And it's very easy to think this. However, there are two types of accessibility. We also can go from accessibility to inclusive design, and that is design and accessibility combined. So it's a much bigger picture. Now, it's very easy to think of accessibility as being related just to disability, but one of the things that we forget quite easily, especially within our digital privilege, smartphone, latest tech users, is that a lot of people struggle with access to online products and services. So there's that access side, and then there's people who struggle with the ability to use online products and services as well. So looking at access, in the latest report in this year, 4.1 million adults in the UK are classed as being offline. So it would be easy to assume it would be older people, but that's not actually the case. So when we're looking at this, 48% are under 60 years old. So it's pretty much a 50-50 split. 47% come from a low-income household, and 32% have a disability. Now, when these people were surveyed and they were asked what would get them online, 75% of them said nothing. Half of them expressed security concerns as being a reason that they didn't want to be online. And then in terms of connectivity, a fifth of them say that they're offline because they don't have an adequate connection. And a further 21% who fall into the disability category say that there is no suitable technology for their condition to enable them to go online. So this is a good portion of people who are not able to go online. And this, to me, leads to a problem because a lot of services are going digital first and pushing people to go online. But it's actually really hard for some people to do that. So this is another research participant. And she said, sometimes I feel like I'm being pushed into doing things online. It doesn't always suit me or my daughter who has a disability. I'm very old-fashioned and do prefer things on paper. So now we've got this kind of gap between wanting to be digitally first and making products and services super fast, intuitive, great usability online. But we also have this demographic of people who just don't want to do that, which does concern me a little bit on how potentially we're going to start leaving these people behind. Now, I mentioned with Keith that he used his laptop at home because that's where his girlfriend and his daughter are. And one of the things that is in the Microsoft Inclusive Design Manual is the concept of the persona network. So a lot of the time we think about the individual that is going to be using our product or service, but we don't think about the network that sits behind them. So quite often people like Keith, like Sonia, are getting other people to help them use online products and services. So when we think of our persona, if we only think about that person, we really don't know what else is going on around there. And it really struck me when I first saw this, because I think from a UX perspective as well, I mean, I'm not going to get started on personas, but we can think too narrowly and not really understand what the full breadth of the usage is of what we're doing. They also have this, which is the persona spectrum. So this is where we're looking at inclusivity rather than just disability. So on the left, we are looking at disability, so speech as an example. So you might be non-verbal, but then there are temporary situations. You might have laryngitis, you might have a sore throat, you might be rendered temporarily unable to speak. Or you might be in a situation where if you're speaking in a second language and you've got a heavy accent, you might be hard to understand. So when we start to look at the temporary and the situational, we move away from disability. We start to look at situations that all people who might be using the services that we make might be in. And this expands out to other categories as well. And I think the thing that I like about this so much is that it's so easy to see ourselves in this, which breeds so much more empathy and stops accessibility being this little disability box as well. I was in arm injury category quite recently because I cut myself opening an avocado because that's how I roll. The most millennial injury, apparently. And common. So I was rendered with a temporary situation. So I want to go on the final assumption, which is we are working with the same toolkit as the people who are using our stuff. So this is how a lot of us work. This is kind of how I work. So we've got latest computers, smartphones, everything's up to date. If we're lucky, we work in offices that have got views and beer fridges and ping pong and beanbags and all of that stuff that we like in technology. And it's very easy to think that other people have this same setup as us. But as I mentioned before, I've been working with mechanics, and their setup is quite different. So the people using the service I work on, their office looks like this. So I would like to think I art directed this, but this was genuinely how it was, with like the screwdriver coming in and the oily rag. And you can just get a glimpse of it above the really dirty printer, but there's some wood there. And that's because this is the office. It is in this, the computer lives in the shed, and that is how they work. And it is a complete world away from the office and the setup and the technology and the tools that we in technology inhabit. And there was some talk earlier as well about taking the happy path. I think a lot of us like to take the happy path, and especially within UX design as well. We frequently create idealized personas, attractive people happily interacting with our products and completing tasks. So kind of like this guy, he's like our perfect persona. Like he's smiling, whatever he's using, he loves. There's no problems. He's not hit any error messages yet. It's all good. He's in a lovely office, everything's sparkly and shiny. But that's not what the users of the service that I work with look like. They're not in this atmosphere. They're here. So the astute of you will see that there is no computer in the photograph here. There's actually no computer in the workshop that he works in. The computer, the single computer, is in reception. The reception is a workshop away. So this mechanic, when he wants to use our service, has to walk from his workshop through a workshop to reception. If he's lucky, he gets on the computer. If he's unlucky, someone's ordering parts and someone else is trying to book other people in, so he has to wait his turn until he can log on. And then he can come back and do his thing, and he will do that several times a day, going back and forth. Now, if we were to design a user journey for this person, there is no way that we would make an assumption that he's not actually at his computer. I think especially the way that we work, I mean, even now I'm a touch away from my computer. A lot of us is almost extensions of our bodies. But for our people using our service, it's not there. And this is where I really cannot stress enough the importance of user research and going out and seeing how people are actually using what we make. So I'm working within GDS, which just got mentioned. And this is what they say about user research. Without research, you won't know what problems you're trying to solve, what to build, or if the service you create will work well for users. They also have another saying, which is user research is a team sport. Now, there's another quote which I really like, which ties in really well with this, which is by a woman called Erica Hall. And she says, everyone is responsible for looking out for the user. So I want to share a little bit of the work that I've been doing with you. So this is part of the QR issue flow. So this was version 1, and this is our wall at work. So we've got the user journey on the top. You might be able to see that a couple of screens are crossed out, because when I took them in to show the devs, they were like, why is that happening? I was like, we don't need that, it's fine, let's get rid of that. And then all of these quotes are around our user testing as well. I don't think they're quite legible. There's one, my favourite, is I didn't actually read what you were supposed to do, which is why they got stuck. But all of this research and all of the testing that we put together has enabled us to iterate new versions. Now, the lower level, and these screenshots here, all of the Post-it notes are from the dev team. So it's been on the wall, and we've had everyone who is involved in the product giving them the ability to feedback, have conversations, and we have chats around that as well. So it's been a really, really great way of working collaboratively. And having an interdisciplinary team has been really wonderful for that as well. So I want to leave with one idea and one thing that I've been thinking about. And it's us as a community. We're a community that exerts great influence. We must protect and nurture the potential to do good with it. When you go out and you meet people and you speak to them, you can see that when their skill sets are different from us, there's a vulnerability about them. And the way that we work, the way that we put things out into the world, if we don't really understand fully what their needs are, how they behave, we do have the ability to do harm, which we don't want to do. We don't want to be doing that. So what we really, ideally for me, what we want to do is understand what we're building, who it's for, what their needs are, and why, before we write a single line of code. And that's just something to leave you to think about. Well, that's it. Thank you.